Hello and welcome back to Media MD, the podcast where each fortnight we prescribe each other a piece of media that we have somehow missed. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And this week, Elliot, we're taking a look back at Broadchurch.
Yep.
So I've watched it, some of it. Actually, let's just start off by saying how far did I get? I finished the first season and then I'm like 3 or 4 episodes into the second season.
Okay,
and I will have things to say about that soon.
Yeah, but I guess so in terms of spoilers, it's probably mostly the end of season 1 that is going to be getting...
And I'll probably touch on like the first 2 episodes of season 2, just because I think there are things in there that are indicative of things that I want to talk about with the show. But
sure.
Yeah, we definitely won't be diving any further than that. So just to demonstrate our willingness to spoil this, let's do a plot summary. So I'll summarize the plot of season 1, I guess. So it follows Detective Alec Hardy, who's a new detective who comes to this town it's kind of unclear whether he comes because of a case or he comes right before a case kicks off, coincidentally.
I sort of have headcanoned that it was sort of like he was looking for somewhere to sort of go to after the whole scandal that sort of starts to come into season 2, and Broadchurch just sort of presented itself because of the case. Yeah. The other character we're following is Detective Ellie Miller, who is played by Olivia Colman, as we discussed in the prescription episode. And I realized in my notes I accidentally wrote her name down as Sophie Chapman like 4 times, which is the name of a character in Peep Show. So if I accidentally do that, just bear with me, guys. And she's lived in the town like her whole life, basically, and she is kind of the connection to the town, as we said in the first part. We follow the death of this young boy, and we follow how his death kind of affects the town, and it starts to unravel all the secrets of the town as these two start investigating everybody. Things like the dad was having an affair with a lady who owned a hotel, and there's this weird lady who lives in a trailer park whose husband like murdered and raped and murdered her oldest daughter, and all kinds of weird things that kind of come out. And then at the end, we solve the mystery. You forgot the best one, which is Argus Filch and his shop. Yeah,
that's right. Filch. Oh, is that Filch? Oh my God. I was wondering where I recognized him from. The guy who kind of runs the local newsagents and also runs the like ocean Boy Scouts called the Sea Scouts or something. I don't know what it is. Yeah. Turns out that he had an affair with a student of his when he was a teacher, and then ended up marrying her, which that was an interesting little thing, but maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. But so ultimately where we get to is we find out at the end what happened to the boy. And this is the first thing I want to talk about, because I think this is the first problem that I had. But I actually, no, I don't want to talk about it yet. I want to talk about it a bit later, after I've kind of set the stage for it a bit more, I think.
Okay.
Let's talk about what I liked about this show first, because there was a lot that I liked about this show. Overall, my opinion on it is pretty high. There were just a couple of things that really got to me when I was watching it. The visuals of this show it's a beautifully like made show. It's this kind of seaside town.
They really capture that beauty of the English countryside.
Yeah, and it's this very atmospheric show. It's definitely sets an atmosphere of the town very well. It has this kind of quiet town vibe, and there's a lot of things that happen during like the middle of the night, and we see, Alec Hardy kind of walking around through the town at night or whatever it is, and it's a town that definitely is able to have this kind of warm and friendly vibe, while also like feels like there's shit lurking around every corner, which is great, because that's kind of the vibe of the show as we kind of dive into the secrets of all the townsfolk. So I think it's a very well shot, like well made from a visual perspective show. I want to talk about a couple of like scenes in the show that really kind of hit this home to me. At the very beginning, so we see like the boy's death, kind of. We see parts of it. And then at the very beginning, we watch the dad, the father, heading to work. And it's this one shot that tracks him as he's heading through the town, and he has like 2 or 3 line interactions with most of the townsfolk that we'll meet over the course of the season. And it's this great show for establishing... It's a great shot that establishes like a bunch of the main characters, as well as gives this town a real sense of like place. I really liked it. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, well, and because I mean, we talked a little bit 2 weeks ago about how like I didn't want to say that the town was a character.
A character, yeah.
But I think what would be more appropriate, I think, is to say that the town is important to all of the characters, and I think
definitely.
That's the sort of difference. So as compared to like as we discussed Firefly, where I would say Serenity exists as its own character. In this, it's just the town is important to the characters.
Yeah, and even more than that, I think the town kind of acts as a representation of the characters. Like it has this quaint, charming, like small town feel, but then with seedy stuff happening under the surface, basically all the time.
Exactly, and obviously, as we learn more about just about every character, it turns out that they seem really nice on the surface, but there's always some weird, dark secret that they've got.
Yeah, almost no character gets out of this clean, I would say.
Yeah.
So one other shot I want to kind of point to, which I think was very interesting. This was also from the first episode. Right after Danny is found dead, Ellie Miller and Alec Hardy go to talk to the town. And as they're heading inside, Hardy says to Miller, watch the reaction of the family, because this is our best chance for them to give something away if they know something, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously, as he's saying that to Miller, he's saying that to us, the audience, as well. And so we sit down and we watch Hardy tell them, and then we just get a shot of the family reacting. And it's this great moment because they see it as this is your chance to like solve part of the mystery, potentially. And then we just get to watch the family react, and it really engages you, and it really pulls you in as a kind of participant in solving this mystery. Actually, it led me straight away to think, the dad's guilty, which is like the red herring of the first half of the season.
Yeah, true. And I mean, because like I sort of said, a huge part of the story, or a huge part of Broadchurch, is that whole how this sort of tragedy emotionally affects everyone, and so that's also a good way to trick you into watching them really closely, so that you're front and center when they all emotionally fall apart, particularly the mum, Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's very compelling, especially because we've just watched for the first half of the first episode her try and figure out where her son is.
Yeah,
and we know that he's dead. Like, because just from the fact that we know we're watching a crime drama and we saw a kid.
Because it's a TV show, you sort of put 2 and 2 together, and you're like, well, obviously this is the mum of the dead kid. Yeah,
it's very... Yeah, I think the first episode really does a good job of just getting you so engaged in the mystery and the characters and everything. I really, really loved it. Let's talk about the characters a bit. I think there were a lot of characters in this that were very well developed. Specifically, obviously, Olivia Colman and David Tennant are like really, really, really good actors in this, Elliot.
Yeah, I know, right?
They really nail it. Olivia Colman especially. There's one moment in particular where I was just like, holy fuck. And I'm going to talk about that when we get to the ending of the show. But even other characters who I thought would just be kind of one-dimensional, like the kind of out-of-town reporter character. There's a reporter who is a kind of like a lower tier journalist at a bigger paper in the city, and hears about this and wants to kind of chase a story. And so she comes to the town to chase the story.
Causes trouble, basically.
Yeah,
from the
and
perspective
basically
of the town folk.
As soon as she gets there, she starts doing things that I immediately read as shady. She does stuff like take a toy from the beach where it's being left at a memorial for Danny and giving it back to the sister, being like, you shouldn't leave that there. And maybe there's some genuineness to that, but when I was watching it, it just kind of read as she is desperate for an in with this family, and so she's doing stuff to try and get on the good books.
Yeah, no, that's definitely how I read it as well. Like for most of the first season, you're just like, man, screw this shady bitch. Like,
Yeah,
she's all up in everyone's business, causing trouble.
Yeah, but she actually started to grow on me over the course of the show, just because.
Yeah,
I don't know what it was. Just because she kept being there and she kept doing things that maybe I reckon she crossed the line a few times, but she had a consistent, well-developed character who seemed like she was, yes, trying to find a story, but also trying to genuinely do something positive, you know?
Yeah. And like, because she started to, some of her behaviors, like she sometimes did things that maybe hurt the story, but help people and stuff. Like she wasn't just a story writing robot. She actually had empathy sometimes, and that just helped her feel like a person.
And I think she's one of the best examples of character growth over the course of the show, or kind of characters that you really get engaged with just because this is a well-made show. The sister of, probably Danny's sister, is another good example of a character that I feel is just going to be kind of one note as the kind of slightly messed up sister of the victim, right? Yeah. But over the course of the show, you really do get more of a sense of what she's going through, especially as her parents' relationship kind of falls apart and then puts itself back together. Yeah, and she ended up, to me, being one of, I think, the most reasonable characters in the show. We've been dancing around it for a while, so let's just talk about it. The ending of the show. So,
yeah.
Again, spoiler alert. Spoilers incoming. It turns out that the person behind it was Miller's husband, who has kind of been engaged in the show just as a way for Miller to bounce off her troubles with Hardy, who is a kind of frustrating boss for her, as well as just with the case in general, which obviously gets to her because she knew the kid and this is her town.
Well, because it's established that her family was quite close to like Danny's, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And like Danny and her son Tom were, or everyone kind of saw them as very close friends.
Yeah.
And I think they were for a long time.
Yeah.
So it ends up being the dad and, sorry, the husband, Miller's husband.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So Miller's arc throughout the season is her learning not to trust people, basically.
Yeah.
And this resolution definitely is on theme for that. It fits the theme of the show, or the theme of kind of Miller's growth. But it just, to me, it felt like it came out of nowhere a bit, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. I'm mixed about it, because there was one time where there's one scene where Miller goes to meet her husband and Tom at a skate park, and Miller has a conversation with him, and Miller's like, oh, so we're still kind of looking into everybody, and the husband's like, oh, everybody? And Miller's like, oh, almost everybody. And it turns into this flirting of like him pretending he's a criminal and her being like, oh, I'm going to arrest you, in that kind of flirty way that a husband and wife, one who is a cop, would do. And watching that scene, I was like, oh, that's a bit weird, but it's definitely not him. And maybe that's a reflection of the show kind of trying to teach me to be less trusting of characters as well. But I don't know. I feel like it fits the themes of the show, but it just felt too out of left field to be satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, because I just remember sort of when it was revealed when I was watching it, I was just kind of like, well, there's no way I could have seen that coming. But yeah, like I said, then I just immediately jumped from that to, oh man, this is going to fuck Ellie up.
Yeah, and
it does.
It does. And this is what I want to talk about. The one of the pinnacles of the acting from Olivia Colman to me was the scenes where she learns what's happening. So Hardy tells her, and then she kind of is in disbelief, and she goes through all these kind of different stages of denial to acceptance, which eventually just kind of culminate in her having a bit of a freak out in the police station. And it was, heartbreaking,
yeah,
as it would be. it was very well acted, and
I think it's interesting because as well as like being well acted, I mean, what always impressed me was, as I sort of brought up, these seasons were being done a few years apart, and sort of between these seasons, she was going back and doing things like Peep Show. So it's like it's really impressive that you can get that in character and then drop out to other things, and then come back, and particularly in season 2, there's other moments where both of them sort of really nail it again, and I'm always really impressed.
Oh, you just recaptured that character, like. Yeah, sometimes when I look at actors in comedies, it's like, oh, that's not that hard. I could do that. And then sometimes I look at actors in shows like this, and it's just like, oh, fuck, this is a craft.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is incredible. Olivia Colman nails it. Really nails it. I get what you're saying about the show kind of being more about her reaction to the unraveling of the mystery, and I agree with that. And we talked about the kind of sub-mysteries over the course of the season being on this scale between seeded and coming out of left field. And like an example is this lady I talked about who lived in the trailer park. She's basically set up as the main suspect for us, the audience, the whole time.
Yeah.
And it turns out that she was kind of involved. I mean, she saw something, but she hasn't really been talking about it because there's this whole thing about her son she thought her son was the murderer, but it turns out he wasn't. And that felt very engaging and compelling to me because it was like plotted out for you, and it was kind of seeded, and you were like, oh, this character's interesting. What's going on there? And it felt compelling as it unraveled, even if it didn't ultimately end with us figuring out who the killer was. Whereas Tom being the killer really just kind of happens.
Sorry, Joe.
Joe, the husband.
Yeah.
In fact, it happens where they're just kind of hanging out, and then they find out that Danny's phone has been turned back on, and they track it down, and Joe's just standing there. And I'm like, is it him? What's happening? I'm very confused. It just felt like there was a little extra bit at the end where he gets discovered as the killer. And it felt, I don't know, it just felt disconnected from the rest of the show to me.
Yeah. No, and it's the most, I mean, the answers to the season 2 and 3 mysteries, which I can't really go into too much, obviously. I would say they're less left fieldy and more kind of, there's extra gotchas. Like it's sort of the people you expect to be involved, but there was a little bit more going on than just like so I've forgotten the name of what they call the place where the season 2 stuff is going
Sandbrook.
on with them. Yeah, Sandbrook. Like the Sandbrook stuff, sort of the people who end up sort of being the people who done it, they're you sort of like, well, this is sort of the people I expected, but it didn't quite happen in the way that I expected, and that's why it seemed so convoluted. And I think that I liked those better because of that, because it wasn't just
it wasn't just
Joe.
out of the field.
It was more like, oh, okay, so it's just that there was more to why this happened than I thought. Yeah.
Let's talk about the second season. So I'm like 3 or 4 episodes into it, but I kind of have fallen off of it a bit, and I think the reason is, I think there's a couple of reasons. It feels like a second season to me. It feels like season 1 is, here's the story we wanted to tell, and season 2 is, oh shit, we were really successful. Well, here's another story.
Because especially season 2 is sort of divided up into 2 stories. It's Joe's court case, which is very much just a sort of follow-on extension of what season 1 was. Like it's not really its own thing, and it just kind of carries through. Whereas, and then the other one is finishing off all this Sandybrook stuff.
Sandbrook. So maybe we should explain. So Alec Hardy's plot thread throughout season 1 is he failed to solve the murder of 2 girls in a place called Sandbrook, and he fucked it up. Or not he fucked it up, but the case got fucked up under his watch, and he feels very guilty for it. And so
he kind of got like destroyed for it in the media.
Yeah, he took the fall for it, I think, in a kind of act of heroism,
good way
which
of putting
endears him to us, the audience. But he's kind of escaped the city. He's obviously had a lot of stress, and it's led to some medical problems, which I never really quite figured out exactly what they were. Something to do with his heart being a bit messed up.
Yeah.
And he kind of runs away, and now he finds himself in basically quite a similar situation, and because of that, he's very driven to solve it. And so Sandbrook in season one is this pivotal element in Hardy's backstory that sets him up as the character that he is in the first season.
Yeah,
and then in season two, it's like
the details. It's just it only exists as much as it needs to explain who he is.
Yeah, totally. And then season two is like, remember Sandbrook? That's what's happening now. And it's like, oh, okay. I don't know. I
agree. I remember because season two, it doesn't really feel like it introduces anything new. It digs up Sandbrook and it drags out Joe Miller's stuff. In saying that, like, I mean, that came across as probably more negative than it should have, because I still really enjoyed it. But I totally get what you're saying in that it very much feels like somebody just went through, like, read all the scripts to season one. It was like, what can I pull out of this to
make a second season about? Yeah, it very much feels like the Rogue One kind of thing, where it's like, what's a thing in the backstory that we can expand upon here?
And I mean, I personally still really liked it.
Yeah, and it's still obviously it's still a well-made show, and it's still well acted.
And the Joe Miller stuff takes some interesting turns, and Sandbrook does, but I didn't enjoy that as much. I thought the Joe Miller stuff was actually more interesting.
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to say about this, which is I feel like in season two, I don't really have like a mystery to follow along yet. What happens in the first few episodes is Joe Miller is on trial, and everyone thinks he's going to plead guilty, but he pleads not guilty, surprising everyone, including his lawyer. And so it turns into this trial of him trying to contest the murder charge because, well, so far as we know, it's because he thinks that being a child murderer in prison and kind of a paedophile in prison is going to cause him to get fucked up and killed, basically. The other plot is Lee Ashworth, who was the prime suspect in Sandbrook that never really got taken down. He's come back to try and find a witness that turned against him, that Hardy is trying to protect. And the episode the most recent episode I was watching ends with Ashworth having kidnapped the witness, and so I'm assuming the plot from there will kind of follow on with unraveling exactly what's happening. And there's some hints that Ashworth is innocent and Hardy got it wrong.
But especially because he's so obviously guilty that you just can't believe that he is.
Yeah, even if he's not guilty, he's very, very shady. Like, he's very clearly not a good person. It doesn't feel like there's a mystery for me to uncover yet. You know, it feels like the trial's going to happen, and we'll see what happens with it, but there's nothing unknown about that. It's just kind of what's going to happen, you know, and kind of the same thing with the Lee Ashworth stuff.
Well, I guess with the whole Sandbrook stuff, it's not until a few more episodes later that I feel like you have enough pieces to then start to theorize about what happened there. Because obviously what happens at the end of season 2 is you get all the answers to what happened there, obviously.
Of course.
But you're right, maybe it takes sort of too long, and this may have been lost on me because I just sort of binge watched the whole thing. Maybe it takes a bit longer than it should have to give you enough pieces to really start to feel like you can be a part of that.
Yeah, I definitely, I touched on how from the start in season 1, I'm engaged with red herrings and trying to figure out who did it and all this stuff. And it feels like there's none of that in season 2 so far. I don't know. Yeah. It's a weird criticism to level at the show because it's obviously still well made, but it feels like the kind of most compelling factor about the show isn't there yet in season 2, and it's weird to kind of keep watching it. I want to keep watching it to see what happens, but I also don't feel like I have that pull to keep watching it at the moment.
Well, because you'll probably be glad to hear then, because season 3 is quite different, because sort of, again, what happened at the end of season 2 is they're like, well, now we've definitely sort of run out of stuff, and so season 3 I would describe, once you've seen all three, season 3 kind of feels like the one that is sort of tacked on because 1 and 2 share that story.
Yeah.
And season 3 is very much, it's a separate case. It's a case of rape of a new character, and that introduces a whole network of new characters as well. And so you still have characters like Danny's family is still sort of in it, but a bit looser and more in the background, and it's really more about these new characters who have been introduced, and it's a whole separate crime, and so that feels it's much more its own story. Season 3.
Interesting.
So it sounds like you might prefer that.
Do you feel like that's a detriment? Like if you had to, I hate this. I hate what I'm about to say, Elliot, and I'm sorry. If you had to rank the seasons, what would you say?
Yeah, it was interesting. I remember because I didn't know how I felt at the time because it did sort of feel tacked on, but then at the same time, I don't know that I would have wanted to just hear more about like Joe Miller and Danny and Lee Ashworth. So
yeah,
I think if I had to rank them, I'd probably. I mean, I don't know how much I'm being biased by this conversation, but I would have gone 1, 3, 2. I think season 3. It's interesting because it tackles this whole. It tackles rape, and so a huge sort of theme of the season is sort of sexuality and all that, and that was just a really interesting, different theme for the show to try and take on, and I've read interviews where Chibnall sort of talked about how it was something he'd never really handled before, and he found that challenging, but in a good way, and I'd sort of I thought it was a really good sort of way of tackling the issue because it's obviously a pretty serious issue.
Interesting. I like when I think about Broadchurch, I'm like, this is a show that I conceptually like, and I want to keep watching it, but then at the moment I just don't have any pull to do so. But I did like the show a lot on the whole, and let's use this as the segue. Well, maybe
I should have recommended you Grace Point instead, which was the US remake that only went for one season. So you could have just
Elliot. Who's in it?
David Tennant actually, and Chris Chibnall still directed, I think. So
interesting.
I think it's actually regarded as like not terrible, but I think they just decided that they weren't gonna remake the rest of the seasons as well. But
that's such a weird thing to do. Like,
yeah, I really don't like because I haven't seen any of it, but I read the Wikipedia thing. And it's just like it's David Tennant and Chris Chibnall behind the scenes, and then they've just literally subbed in actors to play the same versions. Roles, and it's just like I don't understand why any of this is necessary.
Why do people feel like you need to make like they won't get the accents? It's a British small town is so different to an American small town. I mean, I guess there's an element of truth in that, but it's like they think they can't relate to it, or
I don't get it. And there's just been so many absolute train wrecks. I think everyone just wants to recreate the US Office, and they're not looking at the graveyard that's filled with US in-betweeners and US IT
fucking
crowd.
hell, US in-betweeners. Well, that's a pretty down note to end on, but let's bring it back by talking about overall my thoughts. Liked it. Season 1, so good. Season 2, we'll see. Jury's still out. That's relevant. That's a relevant piece of wordplay there. If I had to give it a number, which I do for this format, I would probably give it an 8.5 out of 10. I really did enjoy it quite a lot.
Wow, so we really are still following the Dirk Gently episode, because I think that's what I gave that.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically the same show, let's be real.
Dirk Gently and Broadchurch, the same thing.
They're come on, Chibnall, get your own show. Actually, I think Broadchurch came out before Dirk Gently, so...
Well, Dirk Gently was written by a British author way before that, so it's clearly just a plagiarism of Douglas Adams. Broadchurch is basically a TV adaptation of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, the book. All right, that's us for the fortnight, I think. Let's just stop before we go any further there. Remember to follow us on Twitter and Facebook if you want to interact with the show. You can leave us kind of your thoughts on what you thought about Broadchurch in our Reddit threads, which you can find in the links in the show notes down below.
You know what? Leave us a review on iTunes as well. That would be helpful. Do it. You should. It'd be a good idea. You can also check out our website, which has links to do all of those things if you can't figure them out. That website is mediamdpodcast.com. That also has links to our discussion threads, a contact form, as well as all of the previous clues for the Media MD ARG. You can help figure out just who is Dr. MD and why his boat's so burned. Elliot, what's our clue?
Fern.
Fern. And we'll see you next week.